So today we're going to dive into a way of looking at Scripture called the straightforward voice. It's an approach that really pushes us to understand divine warnings, especially about the reality of hell, by simply taking the text for what it says literally. And really, the entire argument we're about to unpack, it all rests on this one foundational principle. God is not the author of confusion. The core belief here is that God's communication is meant to be a clear signal for everyone, not some kind of complex riddle that only a few people can figure out. So first, let's really get into the main concept itself, the straightforward voice and this whole idea of divine clarity. Okay, so here's the formal definition. But what does that actually mean? Well, the crucial point is that Scripture is an objective standard. It's a clear signal that doesn't need our personal stories or complicated theological systems to prove that it's true. It just is what it is. This framework is built on a few key ideas. First, the Word stands on its own. It doesn't need us to sign off on it. And this next one is huge. The literal, physical resurrection of Lazarus is held up as the standard for truth. Think about it. If we accept that miracle as a literal fact, something that completely bypasses human explanation, then shouldn't that same standard of belief apply to all of Scripture? And that, right there, leads us to the central question. It's a challenge, really. It pushes us to be consistent. If we can accept one incredible miracle as fact, why do we suddenly start looking for metaphors and wiggle room when we're faced with the literal warnings of hell? To make this a little clearer, let's start with an example, the ritual of communion. We're going to look at the difference between the divine picture and the human reality to see just how easily a simple message can get distorted. So on one side, you have Jesus' original intent. He used a simple meal, a picture, to explain this profound reality of spiritual fellowship with him, just bread and wine. But look what happened on the other side. You get the human distortion. The argument here is that by creating this complex system where the bread literally transforms, institutions created a tool of leverage, a way to control people, and that beautiful, simple message got buried. Okay, now let's take that exact same picture versus reality framework and apply it to the much heavier topic of hell. The logic, though, stays exactly the same. A physical picture is used to explain a spiritual reality. The physical anchor here was a place called Gehenna. You might also know it as the Hinnom Valley. Now, this wasn't some fantasy land. It was a real place, a constantly burning garbage dump right outside Jerusalem that everyone at the time would have known. So according to this interpretation, Jesus wasn't just speaking in abstract terms. He was pointing to a real, relatable, and frankly, disgusting image to warn of a very real, literal destination. And this is where it all comes together. The picture, the symbol, like fire or darkness, doesn't mean the destination itself is just a symbol. Not at all. Instead, it makes a spiritual reality that's almost impossible for us to comprehend understandable. The picture of fire doesn't cancel out the reality of judgment, any more than the picture of bread cancels out the reality of fellowship. And that brings us to a caution for today. This framework critiques our tendency to apply our own human logic to God's warnings. It points to examples, like some of Kirk Cameron's views, to suggest that any effort by us to fix or soften God's message is actually a kind of contamination. This is the analogy that's used, and it is powerful. It's like adding lead to the water pipes. You can't see it, but it poisons the water. The argument is that when we filter God's clear warnings through our own emotional comfort or our own sense of justice, we're poisoning the purity of the message. We're adding something that was never meant to be there. So, how does this contamination actually happen? Well, it's a process. First, we filter the warning through our own feelings. Then we start to re-engineer it, to tweak it so it fits our idea of what seems fair or logical. And the result? The message is compromised. It just doesn't carry the same weight or clarity as the original, straightforward warning. So this all leads to a final call to action, a call to go back to the source itself and to reject any contamination of the message. Ultimately, we're presented with a pretty clear choice between two paths. On one side, you have contamination, watering down the message to make it easier to swallow or twisting it into a tool for control. And on the other side, you have clarity, just accepting the straightforward voice of Scripture for what it says and taking it literally. The final message is simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It's a call to bypass all the layers of human reasoning and institutional frameworks and to just engage directly with the Word itself. In this view, the question isn't whether the message makes us comfortable. The real question is, do we trust the one who delivered it?